Week 15 in the NFL starts tonight. Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. And it's crazy to think that we're in Week 15 of the NFL here. And, we got a good game on tonight, plus a couple more storylines to get to regarding the week as well. But we can't talk about this week without the official news coming in about Bill Belichick officially signing that 5-year contract to become the new head coach at the University of North Carolina. Who would have ever thought? We're going to go into it, the news, and how we got to this point, but also, my thoughts on it and some things that I think Bill Belichick is going to have to address being the new head coach of the University of North Carolina. So that's going to be one of our talking points. Also, it is Thursday, so we're going to get to our game picks as well. Part 1 today, Part 2 tomorrow, and also, previewing Thursday Night Football, as well as a couple more topics there towards the end. So make sure to stick around. And before I get started, though, if you guys want to get involved with the show, any questions, comments, or opinions you want to share on any of our topics on today's episode, please don't hesitate to do so. Your input and your thoughts and just any contributions to the show are always welcomed here on not only this show, but also the network everywhere else. And if you want to make it absolutely sure that your message stands out and gets featured on each and every show, there's an easy way to go about that. You are now able to use the Super Chat feature. You can use the Super Chat feature by clicking the $ at the bottom of the chat box to send in your Super Chat. In this way, it guarantees that your message gets on the air. I can see it, and that way I could read it out loud, and we can take the conversation there and forward. So, again, if you want to get involved with the show, use the new Super Chat feature. Let us know what you're thinking, and, hit the $ at the bottom of the chat box, and, let your thoughts be heard. Let me know if you agree with anything, have anything else to say throughout the duration of today's show. But now we can get to the groundbreaking, world-shaking news that, broke last night officially, and it was more, we talked about it yesterday in some capacity during the first, segment of yesterday's show, but I mentioned how I didn't want to get too much into it just because I didn't see at the time an official announcement, made by UNC or anything like that. I didn't want to go too far into it, but now, we waited for the official announcement to arrive, so now we could say that Bill Belichick is entering the world of college football now as the new head coach at the University of North Carolina. The university made the news official last night, and then into today there was more said on it, and Bill Belichick and UNC agreed to a 5-year deal that's still waiting for the approval by the Board of Trustees. I saw that they're supposed to have a meeting today, to kind of approve that whole thing, but regardless of that, it is going to happen. It is official now, and, sources said that the idea of how we got here, who orchestrated the whole thing, was actually led by the board chair, John P. Pryor, and himself and Bill Belichick had met multiple times leading up until this official announcement. And, there were those reports that said that John Pryor and Bill Belichick met on Sunday for like about 5 hours discussing, the move and, the hiring and things like that, but still nothing was really official until, the middle of the week. So it's huge news, obviously, because to go from the NFL to the college ranks, especially for Bill Belichick, where it's obviously not like any other situation because Bill is who he is, right? The greatest coach of all time, in my opinion, the most accomplished one, again. So you'd think, a guy like this would have a job in the NFL, and that was really my whole thing as to why I was pretty hesitant about this move, why I felt like Bill was just going to wait out for a job, and people in the NFL were going to be smart enough to hire the legendary coach of Bill Belichick, but obviously that didn't happen, and just for UNC alone, for a program that gets very little to no attention there, specifically in the ACC, and who also hasn't won an ACC title since 1980. This is, future altering, changing the complete course of the program in just a simple move like that. And there is a lot of doubts. There were some doubts that I saw in the chat yesterday about Bill Belichick going into a new venture, really not having any experience with it. But this is like a once in a lifetime sort of thing for, again, UNC to bring in a guy like Bill Belichick. A lot of people said that this job was beneath him, or that he should not even be at the college level, right? Like, what are we talking about? He's won 6 Super Bowls. He doesn't need to be in college. That was a lot of the thinking with this move. But I think, well, not I think, I've read also that there were some other reports that this was really the only guaranteed, job that was on the table for Bill at this point in time. And it was really like, it was a combination of Bill wanting to coach again. Like, he really wanted to be in coaching again. Being on TV and everything like that was great. But a lot of sources close to him and just sources reporting on the events of everything said that he just really, wants to be coaching right now. He couldn't really wait any longer. So it was a combination of wanting to just coach again, but also the fact that the NFL was very relationship based and just very like, it just wasn't as it appeared, I will say. I guess from the outside looking in, there was a lot of stuff behind closed doors that Bill reportedly didn't like. So because of that and the ill feeling he had towards that, going to college, especially at UNC, where I believe his father was a coach or an assistant coach, really it's just like a full circle moment as well. So there's that. And also on this announcement, it was reported that former NFL executive Michael Lombardi, who was an assistant under Bill Belichick with New England from 2014 to 2016, is also going to be joining Bill Belichick as his general manager at UNC. And then there's other news outlets out there that said that his son, Steve Belichick, could also, be joining him potentially on his staff. And you can imagine other guys like Joe Judge or like Matt Patricia or something like that, right? Also potentially being involved in the recruiting of his staff and making up his official staff as well. And does this mean that Bill's officially done with the NFL and that he's forgetting about them, ditching them, and that he's never coming back? I wouldn't say so necessarily, but this is a 5-year deal, and I think that's like around the minimum that you would need to really establish a culture, a real program, to compete with the ACC teams and then to compete at a national scale as well. So I wouldn't say that he's completely done at the NFL level. It is going to be a good amount of time now before, we probably see him there again. But, just look at what we're talking about now. We would have never thought this was even possible. So for me to rule out that he's going to go back to the NFL, I think would be foolish considering what we're talking about right now. Bill Belichick going and becoming the new coach at UNC. And I was definitely shocked by it. I thought in my mind, I felt like Bill Belichick was going to wait until probably, the end of the regular season to see if any NFL team, was going to wait for the season to end and then, gain everything, all their information, and then, reach out to Bill. But apparently, with all the, I guess what's the word I'm looking for? The disagreements, I guess, with the NFL and the way that they were going about things in regards to him and how much leeway he was going to get in an organization and things like that, he decided to just take this guaranteed offer and run with it, right? He always said that he wanted to coach at the college level as well, so that's another thing. And really just, I didn't think that it was going to happen this quick again, but also in the same breath, right? You don't want to lose an opportunity like this because I think he definitely interested Bill. He wouldn't take it if he wasn't really invested and interested in it. So I guess there's an element of that as well. But I do like how he's going to be, running the show there. All the top head coaches in college football have the ultimate power, in a way, rule over everything that goes on with the program and, everything from top to bottom. The head coaches are the guys in charge, and I like that he has the full power of that. And more and more college is resembling the NFL, with NIL, the contracts, pretty much the transfer portal, kind of like free agency. So there is that little bit of resemblance there. It's not like it is a vast difference, obviously, from the NFL because you're dealing with professionals and on the other hand, you're dealing with kids still, young adults. So that's going to be an interesting dynamic there, obviously. But the opportunity, again, like I mentioned yesterday, to bring UNC to the top of college football potentially, basically from scratch, would be a lot more impressive, I believe, than if he would have went anywhere else in college or if he just simply went back to the NFL, right? This is something new, something unbelievable, and if he's able to do it, the legend of Bill Belichick in just the football world is going to be at a whole different level. So that's what kind of interests me as well. And I also like the fact that he's really changing what college football really is, kind of like when Prime went over to Colorado and how he approached things. Now you get Bill Belichick to come over as well, just adding to not only the attraction of college, but changing that landscape. Like I said, again, I think that's super, super fascinating. And then just, the things that he's still going to have to figure out is whether or not to coach. You're not going to coach kids and professionals the same way. Also, I'd be interested to see if his scheme, on the actual football field changes from what we saw in New England, because I think if you're not going to coach them the same, you're probably going to change up your scheme a little bit, I would think. There has to be some modifications. And also, are the quarterbacks there going to operate more under center? That's been a pretty big talking point in the young quarterbacks coming out of college now. They don't really operate under center and, in those kind of operations. So with Bill being old school, I'd be interested to see if their brand of football is a little bit different or if he also tries to modernize it a little bit more. And then just figuring out things other than the fact that he's Bill Belichick that attract kids to UNC, because I think that's super important too, right? Not just going there because you want to play for Bill, because like he said, it's going to be a pipeline to the NFL, but not every player is going to go to the NFL. So what is going to distinguish your program and your university from, other places where, kids know that they're probably not going to be in the NFL but still want to play in college? What are you going to do differently to try and attract, those kids, those players that are kind of in the middle of it all? So those are just a few of them. This isn't really going to get good, I think, until we get into the new year and things like that, but insane that Bill's now in college football. I never would have thought it, but hey, it's going to be even another reason to keep watching college football as it continues to grow. So we're going to leave that topic there, but in the meantime, we're going to shift back to the NFL and look at Week 15. We got our first part of our game picks here for the week, all the games on Sunday, and we're going to go through them and just basically pick a winner, and I'll explain why these teams are going to win on Sunday. So don't go anywhere. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, I'm losing shit. A stupid myth, you choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Back here on the show to jump into Week 15 in the NFL. It kicks off tonight, but we're not going to talk about tonight's game just yet. We're going to jump all the way to Sunday and start talking about our predictions for Week 15. We're already pretty much through, the regular season. Things are getting tight. It's a narrow road now for the playoffs, and not everybody can fit on the road. So some of these games are going to be pretty big determinants on where the seedings go, and just another measuring stick kind of week where you got some big games, some teams that are still trying to knock each other off, trying to get into the playoffs. So, it's filled with a lot of great games, like I feel like I continue to say each and every week. So it's no different, and we're starting off with one of the best games of the week with the Pittsburgh Steelers traveling, staying in the same state, but traveling to Philadelphia in the Keystone State Battle on Sunday at 4:25 p.m. Eastern Time. And, it's not been great for the Steelers in Philly recently. They do a lot better against them at home in Pittsburgh, but in Philly, I believe Mike Tomlin has not won there as of yet. So, there's that. It doesn't look like George Pickens is going to play, unfortunately. That's a big drop-off, obviously, when you have all the talent that the Eagles have, right? Not having one of your most talented guys is definitely a blow. Also, on the defensive side of things, Larry Ogunjobi, Deshaun Elliott have not practiced as well. So those are two other big guys that are starters that would surely be missing if the Steelers were to play. Without those guys, they would definitely be missed. And, the Eagles are all pretty much healthy, but the biggest thing they've been dealing with, we've talked about already, and it's the comments made by A.J. Brown on the passing game, and there reportedly being like some sort of friction with him and Jalen. So it's crazy how, if it's not anything on the field, if there was nothing off the field that was happening, the Eagles would really have nothing to worry about. They're healthy, if they would have no distractions, if everybody was happy, which is obviously not an easy thing to do, they would be in great shape. But, there's always something, right? With any team, I guess, now trying to get to the playoffs, and that was reportedly a thing that we obviously talked about. So that's really all they're dealing with. So I feel like the game on Sunday, we're either going to get A.J. Brown to go off and Jalen really making it a point to get him the ball, or we're going to get the other end of the spectrum and there's still being a bit of a disconnect there between AJ and Jalen for whatever reason, right? And it doesn't have to be a bad thing. I just think that they're using Saquon a lot. So there's only one football out there, right, where AJ had the ball a lot more. Obviously, he's had injuries this year, but he had the ball a lot more last year because they didn't have Saquon. So there's got to be a bit of give and take there, obviously. But in terms of my predictions, I think it would be very optimistic, blindly optimistic, to go with the Steelers. That they're without George Pickens, and I know Russell Wilson's playing great, and they really can't do no wrong as of late. But I don't see a path where the alternative to George and what way they'd have to win this game. I don't see it. I just don't know what they would do that would work against the Eagles and that offense and that defense as well. So because I can't give an answer as to why or what the Steelers are going to do without George, I got to go with the Eagles. They're playing great too. They're one of the best teams. So I think it's just a little bit too much for the Steelers. I think they could keep it close, but to get over the hump, I'd have to see a way that they do it because I can't give you one right now. So that's the first game. Then we look down a little bit and we get the Packers at the Seattle Seahawks, a potential playoff matchup if things, play out a certain way, but it makes me think back to Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers playing, right, all those years ago in the NFC, but there's a whole different cast of guys here, and, the level is still really no different. The Seahawks are playing great. They're one of the hottest teams right now on both sides of the ball. They're protecting the ball better, and they're creating turnovers and getting to the quarterback on the defensive side of the ball. But Green Bay, too, they just went point for point with who I think is the best team in the NFL in the Detroit Lions. And they arguably could have won that game. So, I'm pretty high on the Packers. I just think, you got to find ways to close out teams, obviously, and, making sure you get these wins because they're important, right? You can be in these close games all you want, but if you're not able to close them, it makes people very hesitant. But I'm still, keeping hope out there for the Packers. They have a good record too. They're 9-4. The Seahawks are also 8-5, and it's kind of interesting though because the Seahawks are 3-4 at home, but they're 5-1 on the road, which is kind of a weird dichotomy there. And Green Bay is 4-2 on the road going into this game, and I just feel like because they're so close, and that's a lot of credit to the Seahawks and what Mike McDonald's doing there with a very young team that I don't think a lot of people expected to win the division anyway. I'm going to go with Green Bay in this one. I'm going to go in Green Bay on the road because of the fact that not only do I want to see more entertainment in the NFC West, but also I just feel like their way of running the ball and being consistent with Josh Jacobs, I like it more and I trust it more than the Seahawks with Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet. I just feel like they don't really run the ball as efficiently. They had a great game this past week, but I need to see it more consistently, and I think the Packers do that. So I'm going to go with the Packers here on the road. Anthony Manzano, welcome to the show. How you doing? And then the next game here on the left side, not much to say. The Ravens are going to win. The Giants haven't won at home all year, and the Ravens are coming off of a bye. I think Derek's probably going to run for a couple touchdowns and probably over 100 yards, and I mean, that's all I can say. The Ravens are going to win. There's no world reason or anything that you could say or I could even think of that makes me think the Giants could be even close. So the Ravens are going to win. Simple as that. We can move on from that game and move to the other side of things. The Jets are traveling to Jacksonville. Both of these teams are 3-10. Who would have thought? Who would have thought the Jets would be 3-10 right now, and also the Jaguars as well, especially with both, I think, coming into this year with some pretty high expectations because the Jaguars collapsed at the end of last year and also paid Trevor all that money. Not a great look, obviously, to be 3-10. And then the Jets, they were Super Bowl contenders, Super Bowl favorites in the preseason, and now, the complete opposite. So it's been pretty disappointing. Both of these teams, the Jets are on a 4-game losing streak, and the Jaguars, on the other side, they just broke a 5-game losing streak by beating the Tennessee Titans. But, the Jets, for being on a losing streak, I feel like they've been playing all right. I mean, Aaron Rodgers threw for like 300-something yards last week. Garrett and Devontae both had 100 yards each. But they just need to close games out. And I know it doesn't really mean too much now, obviously, but I think getting a win would certainly do this team a lot of good. And I just think the Jaguars aren't really playing well. They scored 10 points in the fourth quarter against the Titans, which won them the game, but they could have lost that game 6-0 if that fourth quarter, whatever transpired, didn't end up happening. Could you imagine it? They would have lost 6-0 to the Tennessee Titans. So I'm not really convinced by them. And the Jets have been too close in all these games to not win one of them. And I think with a struggling Jaguars team coming in, I think the Jets have this one in Jacksonville. I like the Jets to win and, break out of that losing streak as well. Then we got a pretty interesting game here with the Dallas Cowboys and the Panthers. It's closer than it looks. And I think if I looked at this right, the Panthers might be the favorites. That might be the first time all year, or one of the only times I've seen them be favorites at all this year. On ESPN, the Panthers are 3-point favorites, and I don't think it's any sort of error or anything like that. I think this game could be a lot closer than a lot of people think. Arguably, and I might be going on a limb here, the Panthers could be 6-7 right now, with a better record than the Cowboys, right? Because the Cowboys are 5-8 right now. The Panthers could be 6-4 right now, not 3-10. If the Chiefs game was extremely close. This past game against the Eagles, they were in position to win, but they fumbled. They could be right there, at 6-7. It's a great job by Dave Canales. He doesn't get enough credit, but Bryce Young really has turned the page also once he returned from being benched to now being the quarterback again. He's played awesome, and really I think the Cowboys were kind of shell-shocked by the loss to the Bengals, and I think this game they could overlook the Panthers in a way. So I think the Panthers deserve a win here. I like them. I like what they're doing, and I like what Bryce Young is doing. But the biggest reason of all could be because DeMarvion Overshown, the Cowboys linebacker, is obviously now out for the rest of the year. And I've been so impressed by him that I feel like him not being there, you're really going to tell a difference with this Cowboys team with him not being out there. Because Mike is great, don't get me wrong. He affects the game a lot. But Overshown has been everywhere for them. Making tackles, getting in passing lanes, stopping the run. He does a lot, almost everything for them. So the fact that he's not going to be there, I think still not a lot of people, know how important he has been to that Cowboys defense, and now in their first game without him, you're going to see how important he is, and I think the Panthers will take advantage of that. So I'm going to go with the Panthers to win over the Dallas Cowboys. And lastly here, we have the Commanders traveling back to New Orleans to take on the Saints. And I mentioned, traveling back because I'm thinking in my head about Marshawn Lattimore. These two teams were involved in the trade at the trade deadline to send Lattimore over to Washington. And up until this point, Lattimore has not played at all for the Commanders. And wouldn't you guess it, the week that they play his former team, Marshawn is healthy. He has no injury designation. He is going to play against his former team. So with that, I think that's an area that they certainly needed. A shutdown corner like Marshawn is huge. Not only trying to push for the playoffs, but in your division with CeeDee Lamb, they're not going to be in the playoffs, but, A.J. Brown and things like that, you're going to need a guy like that. So the fact that he's going to be out there playing, and I'm not expecting Derek Carr to play either, give me the Commanders. They just put up 42 points on Tennessee. It looks like they've regained that spark on offense, so I'm going to go with the Commanders to keep hold of that wild card spot there, at least for another week in Week 15. And that's all the games we're going to get to on today's show. Part 2 is coming tomorrow, so in the meantime, we're going to jump to another segment here and preview tonight's game. Tonight's game is going to be a huge one in the division, in the NFC West, between the 49ers and the Los Angeles Rams. A lot of star power in this game. We're going to break it down, all the matchups and my predictions coming up right after this break.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
We are back here on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to focus in on tonight's game. The Thursday night football game tonight is between the 49ers and the Los Angeles Rams. They're playing their second game of the season. Their first matchup came in Week 3, and the Rams won that game by only 3 points. They erased a double-digit deficit in their first game, and the Rams ended up winning 27-24 in a game where a lot of people were injured. I know George Kittle wasn't playing. I know Cooper Kupp wasn't playing. Puka wasn't playing. McCaffrey wasn't playing. And still, they put up a lot of points. And now, tonight, most of those guys are expected to play in that game. There was also no Deebo Samuel in that game, and he's obviously going to be playing tonight. But, we have an NFC West matchup tonight. The second game, like I mentioned, and this time is going to be played in it's going to be in San Francisco this time around. The 7-6 Rams are still trying to catch up to the Seahawks, right? They're only one game behind of them, and the Seahawks got a tough game coming up with the Packers. And based on my predictions, if the Packers do win and the Rams handle business tonight, they could be in a spot where they could be tied for first place in that division, still having to play the Seahawks one more time at SoFi Stadium. So this game tonight is obviously huge for the Rams, while San Francisco, on the other hand, they desperately try to keep their playoff hopes alive by trying to get a win here and trying to sneak into the playoffs with, a wild card spot or something like that. So, on the topic of San Francisco, they snapped a 3-game losing streak last week with a dominant win over the Chicago Bears. A much-needed performance, I thought. Offensively, they look great. And also, on the other side, if you want to talk about great games and dominant offense, the Rams, they were also in an impressive game with the Buffalo Bills. They ended up toughening it out there at the end, only winning by 2 points, but they put up 44 points in all. So you want to talk about impressive, these two teams, despite where the 49ers are and what I truly feel towards them, I just don't think they're very good this year. This could be another one of those high-scoring games. Throwing out all the records, right? A lot of that stuff doesn't really matter, and the 49ers and Rams treated us to a very entertaining game, like I said, in Week 3, where Juwan Jennings also had 3 touchdowns in that game, and that was without all these other weapons playing. So all the guys are supposed to be active tonight as the last time I checked. So in terms of injuries, I don't believe they've put out any of the inactives yet. I'll keep an eye on it. It might be coming up in just a little bit. But overall, looking at San Francisco and what, they're dealing with and what, or actually I do have their inactives. Their inactives are right here in front of me. For the 49ers, there's not going to be any Trent Williams. They're starting left tackle. They're starting safety. Malik Mustafa is not going to be able to go. And also their cornerback, Rock Ya-Sin. What that means is that Nick Bosa is going to be active tonight. Nick Bosa should be ready to go in tonight's game, so he hasn't been playing for them in a little bit. So to have him back tonight is obviously a huge boost, but also not having Trent there is a big loss. So I guess they kind of offset each other in a way. But Isaac Guerendo was also one that I was keeping an eye on just because he is their number one running back right now, right? Because Jordan Mason's on IR, Christian McCaffrey's on IR. So Isaac Guerendo was going to be the number one running back. He injured his foot last week, though, and, I don't think he returned in the game. I think he went out in the second half, but even still, the fact that he didn't come back was pretty concerning. So I don't see him on the inactive list, so he should be good to go for tonight's game as well. But one thing on the 49ers, I think a part of their struggles has been the lack of production from one Deebo Samuel this year, and he's only recorded 97 total scrimmage yards over, been a point of emphasis, around the not in the team, but I think around the team, with the fans and people talking about it. So it's been something that's, brought Deebo's productivity, not his value, but what he's doing this season to kind of make up for all the injuries and things like that. It looks like he's kind of trailing behind with not contributing as much as, say, Juwan Jennings or George Kittle even. Both of them are having monster seasons where people expect more out of Deebo Samuel. But, those frustrations are not just coming from the outside in, but also from Deebo himself, because he posted on X over the last couple days his frustrations about basically how he just doesn't get the ball enough. And that's circled back to Brock Purdy, and he had to answer a question about it. So, I don't necessarily like it that he just said that he's not getting the ball. I don't think it's a good look, but, he's frustrated, and I don't have a problem with it. Again, it's kind of like A.J. Brown. Like, he couldn't have waited to kind of tell Brock that in the meeting or something like that, or maybe he did, but I just don't think, kind of defending yourself online was the best way to go about it, but, it is what it is, so maybe we'll see a lot more out of Deebo tonight based on his frustrations, obviously. But on the other side, for the Los Angeles Rams, talking about inactives and things like that, I had it up here for a second, I just lost it, but regardless of that, we're going to look at, the Rams, and one thing about them, their offense has really, turned a corner over the last couple weeks, I think, and it's been really impressive what they've been really able to do on that side of the ball. And, not just in terms of points and things like that, and actually looking a lot better, but the way that Matthew Stafford's connecting with Puka Nacua right now. Cooper Kupp's still doing his thing. I think Kyron Williams has been a big part of it as well. And, he scores a touchdown each and every game. So that's obviously huge to contribute now to this effort for the Rams and things like that as well. But overall, this team is really on Puka. I mentioned him briefly there, but I've been really impressed with what he's been able to do over the last 4 games. He's had 33 receptions, 458 yards, and 3 touchdowns. And, just last game, he did almost everything for that Rams offense. And still, Cooper Kupp contributed, Kyron did his thing, Matthew Stafford was looking as clean as ever. So that's going to be huge for them, obviously, in this game where I feel like it's going to be a high-scoring game. So they're going to need everybody to, to kind of chip in to this effort as well. But in terms of their inactives, I have them now here, and the players that will not be playing for them tonight are Stetson Bennett, one of their starting corners. Kobe Durant is going to be out. Benin Jackson, an outside linebacker. Dylan McMahon and Warren McClendon are all not going to be playing for the Rams. So really, it's one starter, Kobe Durant, one of their starting cornerbacks. That's the biggest loss for the Rams, and already for a struggling defense. It's not ideal, obviously, but it is what it is now. He was dealing with, I believe, a concussion, if I was to check real quick. A chest injury. He was actually dealing with a chest injury. So on a short week, he hasn't been able to recover, so he's not going to be playing in tonight's game. But that allows us to go to our matchups. And I got 3 matchups here, but really 4 that I just kind of wanted to throw in there. The first one being Deommodore Lenoir, Charvarius Ward going up against Puka and Cooper Kupp. Not only those 2 guys, but really the entire secondary, and how they try to stop these 2 guys, right? With the contributions of your Tutu Atwell, your Demarcus Robinson, everything revolves around these 2 guys. The Rams do an excellent job of moving Puka and Cooper Kupp around. They can run every route on the route tree. They have different, builds and prototypes as well, so it just makes it even tougher to kind of match up with them and know what to expect. So Lenoir and Charvarius Ward are going to be tasked with doing that, because Lenoir plays in the slot a lot. So I'm sure he's going to see a lot of these guys in and around, where he's lined up at as well. Then the other matchup on the other side of things, we have Juwan Jennings, George Kittle, and Deebo Samuel basically against that defense. The Rams defense struggled against the Eagles and Buffalo. They're the 27th ranked defense in terms of total defense, and still, in the first matchup where they allowed 24 points, there was no Christian McCaffrey, no Kittle, or Deebo Samuel, and still, it was the Juwan Jennings show. So Jennings is going to be out there, obviously, doing his thing. He's had a great year. George Kittle's had a phenomenal year. Deebo, he's trying to make a point again and get involved with the offense. It's going to be a tall task for this Rams defense that, again, I mentioned they're without one of their starting corners, Kobe Durant. So that's another matchup. And the last official matchup I have on here is both teams' offensive lines obviously facing off against the opposing team's defensive line. And what I mean by that is the Rams only have 28 sacks on the year so far, which is 24th in the NFL, and last week they didn't even come close to Josh Allen. Now, Brock Purdy isn't Josh Allen, so is that going to change things? Probably, but it's not been like they're swarming the quarterback, right? It's not been like just because they played the Bills, the Bills are a good team, so that's why they didn't sack them. They really haven't been putting up the sack numbers that you would have hoped for. So are they going to be able to get to Brock, or are they just going to let him throw it all over their defense? It's going to be huge to have that connection. And similarly for the 49ers, right? Getting Nick Bosa back is obviously huge. They sacked, Caleb Williams last week 7 times without Nick Bosa. So having him back there and adding him to Leonard Floyd, Gross Matos, and really their entire defensive line is going to be a huge addition, obviously. So that's the third matchup. Then the last one I have on here is Fred Warner against Kyron Williams. The head-to-head, I think is going to be super cool to see as well. But in terms of who I think is going to win, the 49ers are obviously desperate. They have to win. But also the Rams, they probably feel like they also have to win, right, to at least get in the playoffs, right? So we're going to see 2 desperate teams here. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot of 4th down conversion attempts tonight just because both teams know what's at stake here. But I'm going to go with the Rams to win this game because Puka, you want to talk about players not playing. The Rams won last time without Puka and Cooper Kupp playing, and now they're going to have both of those guys, and they're playing not at a different level, but they're still just starting to appear as night and day. So I have a lot of confidence in them. I think Matthew Stafford's awesome. Sean McVay, he's going to find a way in this game against, a pretty impressive defense, but I think overall the Rams just have more to offer overall. And I don't know if Isaac Guerrendo's going to be 100%, and if he doesn't go, who's going to be running the ball? They can't just throw it every single play. And I like Kyren Williams also for the Rams, to try and establish some sort of running game. So that's why I'm going to go with the Rams here. The more well-balanced, of the teams. I think they're going to win and sweep the 49ers in 2024. But that's what I'm thinking. Kickoff is about, like an hour and 20 minutes away. So we still got some time here to get to some more segments. One interesting one that I saw was the fact that the NFL could potentially incorporate, face mask calls and things of that nature into replay assistant. Replay assistant has been incorporated this season to help officials make some determinations on some calls that they might have missed, and now face masks could be incorporated into that protocol in 2025. So we're going to go over that and some more news, on that and my thoughts overall on, using replay on face mask calls. So that's coming up right after this break.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to the show here. An interesting topic that I came across, I want to say yesterday, around this time actually, while I was doing the show. It just kind of popped up on my phone how the NFL was thinking about incorporating the face mask calls and, the idea of using replay assistant on, these face mask calls and how that could be incorporated in 2025. I read up on it a little bit more today, and basically, NFL executives met yesterday, for the December league meetings, and one of the major talking points was the replay assistant. The replay assistant, which has been implemented more this season to help refs come to a decision, and currently as it stands, replay assistant can help officials pick up a flag that was incorrectly thrown or assist in proper enforcement of a foul that was called. So, if somebody throws a flag out there and the replay assistant sees it, they could tell the officials, hey, that wasn't really a foul, pick it up, it doesn't need to be called, right? And things of that nature, right? And at the league meeting, there was an emphasis on face mask penalties that have not been called this season, some pretty egregious ones, and it leads to sometimes, in some of these face mask calls, it could have led to some game-altering, game-changing moments, like on Thursday Night Football, right? On Thursday here tonight, there was no face mask called on Sam Darnold against the Los Angeles Rams. Funny enough, how Darnold was escaping the end zone, I'm pretty sure, also, and one of the defensive linemen basically just yanked his face mask back, and it looked so obvious on replay and all the different angles that we saw of it, right? How his helmet literally turned to the side, and basically Sam Darnold's face was in the spot where his ear should be, and still there was no call, right? The refs made the point that they didn't see it, that they physically didn't see it, so they couldn't call it or, couldn't do anything about it, when it was pretty obvious that, it was obviously it was a face mask. And because of that, in that game, it was called the safety, and the Vikings were basically, negated a chance to come back in that game. That was Sam Darnold's moment to orchestrate a game-winning drive and kind of bring his team back fully, but because of the no call, everything was ruined. So that was obviously a big moment in that in this regard. Then you had a moment on October the 3rd between the Buccaneers and the Falcons. I believe on Thursday Night Football again. There was not a face mask called on Bucky Irving during one of his runs that would have set up a field goal attempt for the Buccaneers to potentially win that game. But instead, a holding call was called on that same drive, on that same play. So because the referees didn't see the face mask call, they did see the holding call. So they called a holding on the Buccaneers, and it put them out of field goal range. And then in the end, the Falcons ended up winning. Now, that one's a bit more, stretched out, but, it apparently was a pretty obvious call, and at worst, it would have negated the holding call. They would have set a penalty on both sides, and they would have just replayed the down. But the fact that it was only on the Buccaneers is a problem, right? Because they should have called the face mask in that instance. Then, just this past Monday, the Bengals didn't lose, but they almost lost because of the face mask on Joe Burrow when he got sacked, and it was clearly, clear enough for Zach Taylor to see it and for everybody else to see it, but all the officials didn't see it in that moment, so they didn't call it. And the Bengals did punt, and lucky for them, the Cowboys handed it back to them. But, that could have been a big moment, right? That's because face masks are obviously like a personal foul, 15 yards and an automatic first down. At that point, the Bengals could have won the game right there, and instead they punted away. And I know it didn't go how it typically does for the Cowboys to get the ball back because of the fumble, but they could have ended up losing that game. And then in hindsight, when you look back on it, all you get from the NFL and the referees is like, our bad, we missed the call, it was obviously a face mask, we're sorry. And a lot of times, in these instances where the Rams are technically still fighting for the playoffs, that does them no good. That doesn't do them anything, right? For the refs to kind of acknowledge it after the fact, their season's over and now they can't do anything about it. So, the severity of that call is obviously a huge thing, and I don't want to dump all of it on the refs because they obviously do a lot. And, here or there you can miss a call, but there's been some pretty egregious ones, egregious enough for the NFL to kind of bring this up at the league meeting on Wednesday, yesterday. So, the NFL Executive Vice President of Football Operations, Troy Vincent, told reporters that the face mask penalties could be a subject for replay assistant in 2025, which would be a massive change for the NFL because not only has the NFL always been pretty hesitant and pretty doubtful about subjective plays, being reviewable, right? Like pass interferences or things like that. They don't really feel too comfortable, for that to be reviewed, right? Because everybody sees it differently. So it would just make the game even longer, if anything. But also, the fact that it has never been allowed, the NFL has never allowed replay it wasn't called, but because you use replay, now you could throw the flag. That's never been something the NFL has done. If it wasn't called, it wasn't called, and the review can't really do anything, even if it's so obvious and you look at the review and see that it actually is a penalty. It's too obvious not to be called a penalty. Currently, the NFL isn't allowed to then throw a flag, right? But if they incorporated this, right, it would obviously change that, right? Because if you miss a face mask call and then you see it on the replay review and the replay assistant comes in, he tells the officials, hey, you guys might have missed a face mask here. I don't know if that would send them to go look it over, or if the replay assistant would just say, yeah, it was a face mask, call it. I don't know what the protocol would be there, but it looks like, with these calls being so important most of the time, it looks like it could change the trajectory of the traditional way that the NFL has called, these flags or non-flags on the field. So it would be a big deal because, it is I think face masks aren't so subjective to like pass interferences. I don't think those should be reviewable. A lot of the times because the refs are right there. So if it's down the sidelines, either sideline or down the middle of the field, there's always officials there. So I think that's also something that I don't really want reviewed. But face masks are pretty easily determined, right? If your hand's in the guy's face, it's kind of hard to be subjective about that, right? You can only have your hand near a guy's face mask or just near their face in general where it's not a face mask. So I think those would be pretty easy to determine. But, thinking about holding calls and offensive pass interference, offsides, neutral zone infractions, I think their officials are pretty much on top of all those types of fouls. So I don't think those should be reviewable. But a face mask is simple enough or obvious enough where I think using replay would be an actual helpful thing. Because also, you don't want to overdo it and be in a situation where it's kind of fun to see the gamesmanship of, the fact that the refs do miss some calls, right? I always thought it was so cool and kind of funny how defensive backs, because their job is super difficult, right, to stay and mirror a wide receiver step for step, that they wear the opposing team's gloves, the color of their gloves, so that they blend in and they can kind of get away with a few more, calls like that. And I think that's the kind of gamesmanship and, the game within the game that makes it pretty fascinating, right? Because if those are always called and reviewed, then these games would stop and start as quickly as like NBA games, and nobody has time for that. So I think you can't overdo it, but face masks are obvious enough and significant enough where using the replay, I think, would just make it a lot more helpful and there wouldn't be so many of these situations where, the refs are getting called out and they're getting called into question and things like that. They're already doing a lot, so they don't need all this, complaining on top of it. So face masks, yes, everything else can pretty much stay the same. I think face masks is definitely something that needs to be held, to the strictest of, efficiency, I would put it as. So, we'll see if it comes in 2025. They also mentioned at this meeting that they're going to review the onside kick rule because basically it doesn't do anything. So that's something else that they could alter come next year. But that's a long ways away. And actually, speaking of next year, this next segment has to do with next year in 2025 because we're going to have a quick discussion on Shedeur Sanders, projected to be one of, if not the best quarterback in next year's NFL draft. So, looking at the draft order right now, where does he fit in better? The Giants, who hold the number 1 overall pick, or the Las Vegas Raiders at number 2? We're going to talk about that, my thoughts on it, and where I think Shedeur would not only fit better, but I think where he would have the most success in the NFL, at least to start his career. So we'll be right back. That segment is coming up next. Thank you guys for joining me here on our last segment of today's show. Just a quick discussion here on a little bit of the college game. We started talking about college and Bill Belichick, and now we're rounding it all off with some more, this time regarding Shedeur Sanders, projected to be one of the top quarterbacks and one of the top players in the 2025 draft. And I thought it was interesting what we saw over the weekend. And a question here from Anthony: do you think people blew it out of proportion when they saw the interview with Deion and Shannon on his podcast, where Deion said that the only team he would want his son to go to would be Miami? And one, I think those things are always kind of like blown out of proportion. But I mean, Miami is interesting because, I mean, you know, they're kind of like from that area. I believe they're from Florida, so you know, that's one thing, and, you know, wanting to go back there and play there would be awesome, I'm sure, but it is always blown out of proportion. But also, I think, you know, when you say Miami, you know, Tua's there, he just got paid and everything like that. I know there was the health concerns and things like that, but I took it more as like a bit more of a joke, just because the fit, right? If you have Tua there and it doesn't look like he wants to stop playing, you can say that, but in reality, I don't think it was ever going to actually happen. So, yes, it was blown out of proportion. They're always going to be blown out of proportion, but I never really held, you know, any sort of, you know, like legitimacy or reality to it, if that makes sense, right? He could say that, and of course it's going to draw headlines, but I don't think it's something that the Dolphins would even explore. So, what I think could be a little bit more reasonable in terms of what's put out there on where Shedeur is going would be something I saw over the weekend, where there was a video taken back in February that consisted of Deion Sanders, like you mentioned, Anthony, and head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders, Antonio Pierce, at an event in Las Vegas, you know, like 10 months ago now, right? And in that video that it kind of started circling now, both Antonio Pierce and Deion Sanders are talking up front in front of everybody at the event, and it kind of ends with Deion basically saying to Antonio Pierce, "You are truly the best. Now, I just need you to do one thing. I need you to draft those Sanders boys," basically. And everybody went crazy. Everybody started cheering and things like that, right? It drew a lot of attention, and I don't really know why it was brought up recently, but it's out there. I never saw the video, so I thought that was, you know, something kind of like what you mentioned, Anthony. You say, I think Sanders would fit better in New York, and I think Ward would be better in Las Vegas. I actually have it. I have it the opposite. I have it the opposite just because they're both great, right? They're kind of similar in a way too. The way that they play, mobile quarterbacks, accuracy, arm strength, everything. I think it makes sense. But, you know, with them having this opportunity in Las Vegas, I think the pairing of Las Vegas, you know, the lights, the action, the attraction of, you know, Vegas, right? It's Vegas. It's, you know, a lot goes down there. The city, everything, you know, the attention, the media, everything, you know, regarding Vegas. And then you have Shedeur, the son of prime time, you know, the flexing of the watches, the flashy plays, what he says, he has his podcast and everything like that. I think that is the perfect matchup to me. The city, Vegas, Shedeur, the Sanders family, all of that makes so much sense to me. And then, you know, you also say, I think Raiders draft Travis Hunter. That's not a bad pick, but I also feel like the Raiders kind of got, you know, I mean, this is also kind of weird because I was going to say, I feel like the Raiders kind of got the short end of the stick in this year's draft, where they missed out on all the quarterbacks, right? All 6 of them, you know, they went right before the Raiders. But I don't think they got the short end of the stick because they got Brock Bowers, and now he's an absolute monster. But because they didn't get a quarterback, I think this year, if they have a top 2 pick, I always feel like they almost have to go out and get one, right? At this point, right, especially with Shedeur and Cam Ward there, if you can get one of the two, and again, I think it should be Shedeur, if they have the number 2 pick, then I think you have to go out and get him, you know, just for that reason. But what scares me is look what happened in the receiver that the Raiders drafted recently. The Vegas lights got to him. Hope that doesn't happen to Sanders. That's fair. What I see happening, I think the Raiders draft defense this draft and wait till next year when Arch Manning comes out. That's also not a bad option either. I mean, I think Arch is going to be great. And I don't know any of the other quarterbacks along with him in his class, but I don't know. I mean, like that's a decent, plan because the Raiders do need a lot. For me to say that they only need Shador is too optimistic and not realistic at all. So I do understand that point, but in the same breath, I mean, I think they are going to be good players, and just to kind of put it off another year, it would be a little tricky just from the sense that if they don't perform well, this upcoming year, and I'm not saying they're going to be, over 500 just with Shador and Cam, but I feel like if they don't perform at least a little bit better or don't get another attraction on top of Brock Bowers or anything like that, like a quarterback, like maybe a Travis Hunter or something like that, you could be talking about a new head coach and kind of restarting the whole thing, and that would be like taking a step back. And also, with Vegas, Tom Brady's there, and I don't think it's a coincidence that he's now a minority owner there, and also, his relationship with not only Dion, but with Shador, he's kind of like a mentor to him, so I'm sure if they're going to ask anybody about what to do in the draft or anything like that, they're going to go to Tom, and, Tom's going to say probably, that he likes Shador and that he would probably draft him as well. So, those are all kind of the idea with Shador going to Vegas. That would be an idea, and that's why I see the pairing kind of working in favor of the Raiders. Can you see the Raiders maybe trading down, maybe with a team like the Rams who might want to draft a replacement for Matthew Stafford? That would be wild. That would be wild, and it wouldn't be really out of character for the Rams because they've traded away all their first-round picks already before, and now they kind of got them back. Could they do it again? Again, it's kind of in their nature. If you already do it once, you could do it again, but that would be super interesting, and that would be, an ideal situation, right, for any of these quarterbacks to get into. And because the Raiders do need a lot of positions, I think that would be an interesting route to go down, because to just think it's going to be Cam or Shador and for it to just work out kind of like that again is unrealistic. So the idea of trading back is not a bad idea. Again, if the quarterback class this year, I would say, is weaker overall than the one we got last year, so that might scare some people off. And the Raiders could very much do that if they get like a crazy offer from the Rams, right, and they give them multiple first-round picks, or from another team that wants a quarterback that really loves Shador and that really loves Cam Ward. Yes, that could also be a possibility. Or, like we haven't talked about yet, what if the Giants want him, right? The Giants got the first overall pick. What if they want him? But I still think with the Giants, and the idea that, he could still go there, right? Because the Giants hold the first pick in the draft. I think that's where you get a situation where Dion maybe's like, I don't think that's really for my son. For a good amount of reasons that I would actually side with Dion for in this argument, because you look at the Giants and you want to talk about developing quarterbacks and how not to do it. You kind of look at that organization, right? Not only did they pay him all this money that they overdrafted for taking him like 6th overall, they really never got it right with protecting him, putting people around him, other than Saquon, but they let him walk out the door. So back then, when we talked about the effects that could have on the Giants, right? You have outside people looking at this organization like they don't take care of their guys. They don't take care of their real game-changing talent. And with that, I think, comes the idea that maybe Dion looks at them and it's like, I don't like the way you treated Daniel Jones. I don't like the way you treated Saquon, or even Xavier McKinney. I don't want to send my son there. So I think that's where it could get a little bit ugly, with like an Eli Manning situation, pretty ironically, because it's involving the Giants. But back to Travis Hunter, do you think any general manager, even from a rebuilding team, will allow him to play both receiver and corner at the same time in the NFL, or are they going to force him to choose? I think that would get very tricky as well, because I'm from what I've seen from Travis and from what I've kind of heard him talk about, he wants to play both positions. So the fact that maybe if a team is really reluctant on letting him do that, I think you can get into a weird situation where, again, they might say, and it's crazy to even like kind of put this out there, but they could say, all right, well, if you don't want to let me play that both positions, then I'm not really going to want to play for you then. If you draft me, it's going to be like an Eli situation again. And Dion has said that he's going to kind of apply that tactic, I guess, with both Shedeur and Travis. So it feels like Travis wants to play both. He just did the Pivot podcast, and he mentioned how he wants to play both and that he's very adamant about playing both. So I think you could run into a problem there as well. And lastly here, do the Cowboys have enough capital to trade up from where they are in the top 10 to get Sanders? They just paid Dak, so I don't think they would go and do that. If they do that, I really don't understand what Jerry Jones is doing. If you're going to give Dak and make him the highest paid quarterback in history, you don't go up and go trade for Shedeur Sanders. So if they do that, I mean, then really, then I don't really know what they're going to do. But that doesn't seem realistic because through a 7 game, Dak, Dak is Dak. You either love him or you hate him. Some people are really high on him. Some people think he sucks or something like that. I'm just really looking at it from a financial standpoint, right? From that standpoint, no way am I giving if I'm thinking of trading up, and this has to be a discussion, not like after the season, but like months before, when you were even thinking of giving Dak this contract. If you were going to give it to him and you were adamant about giving it to him, you're thinking that he is your guy. He's your guy, that you're going to go with him, that you're going to stick with him, right? Or else put that money elsewhere, right? Like improving the run defense, right? Or the defense overall. But does that seem realistic to you in today's NFL, because how hard it is to play both positions, having to guard a guy like Tyreek and one play and then go against? But, I mean, it's hard to convince Travis of it. If I was a general manager, I wouldn't want a player to necessarily do that. Maybe here or there, but not every drive. Maybe you can convince him of that, but, I don't personally know. I've just seen and watched, what he's talked about and kind of reflected on. So it feels like he's pretty adamant. And what you're bringing up does make a lot of sense. And, the confidence and all of that, but I'm just kind of relaying what Travis is sort of feeling like, and I think that could be an area where it gets a little bit tricky. I love Travis and his confidence, but he has to be realistic in what teams are going to expect of him, because you can't be doing that in the NFL. It's true, but also you think of, and I don't want to make it all about money, but could you imagine the value he could get from being the only player to play both positions and being very good at both of them? How much, leverage that gives them in terms of, the financial side of things. That's a whole nother discussion that we can talk about, but I don't want to carry it on too long. So I appreciate the question. These are all good questions, but unfortunately, we're going to have to end it there. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you guys for the interactions on today's show. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, as well as following the network on all forms of social media. If you want to see more of the show, check out the Podcast Network channel and the Sports Network channel on YouTube as well. But for right now, I've been your host, Manny Maradiaga. Thank you guys for joining me, and remember to join me each and every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more of the live shows. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, to wrap up the week and talk a little bit more about Week 15.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn, ain't that great.